Have you ever caught yourself saying, "I'm fine," when deep down you know something's wrong? Or convinced yourself that a decision was for the best, even though it didn't feel that way? These little lies we tell ourselves are fascinating because they're so common, yet so hidden. We often think that self-deception is something that other people do, that we see the truth clearly, that we know ourselves. But in reality, self-deception runs through every single one of us. We wear masks not only for others, but also for ourselves, shaping our lives with stories that might protect us in the short term, but keep us from growth in the long run. Today, let's unravel this habit of lying to ourselves. Let's look at the reasons behind it, the way it subtly shapes our lives, and most importantly, how we can start living with more truth. Self-deception is something we use as armor, as a shield against discomfort and vulnerability. But at what cost? How many of our choices are influenced by illusions we've created about who we are or what we want? To truly understand why we lie to ourselves, we have to dig deep into human psychology, back to the earliest experiences in childhood, where many of our self-deceptive habits first take root. As children, our minds are open and absorbent, yet fragile. The ways we learn to cope with pain, rejection, and disappointment at a young age often determine how we handle truth and reality as adults. Consider a child who feels they're not good enough because they're often compared to others or scolded for not meeting expectations. To protect themselves, they may begin telling themselves, "I don't need anyone's approval." This might feel empowering at the time, but it could also harden into a belief that distances them from meaningful connections. In adulthood, they might tell themselves that relationships aren't important or that they prefer being alone, when deep down, they're simply afraid of rejection. This isn't something unique or shameful. It's part of how our minds work to preserve us, even if that preservation comes at a cost. This pattern, though protective, becomes limiting. We carry it into adult life, sometimes unaware that our internal narratives are based on reactions to past wounds, not present reality. And by avoiding truths about our fears, insecurities, or even our dreams, we limit the possibilities for growth and connection. Self-deception can be subtle, and that's part of what makes it so powerful. It doesn't announce itself. Instead, it slips into our choices, our justifications, and the stories we repeat. We might say, "I'm too busy to pursue my passion," when the truth might be that we're afraid of failure. Or we say, "I'm just being realistic," when in fact we're afraid of taking risks. These statements sound reasonable, logical even, but they often hide deeper fears or desires we're unwilling to confront. One of the most common forms of self-deception is the justification loop. Have you ever noticed how, when something doesn't go the way we hoped, we quickly find reasons why it wasn't meant to be or wasn't the right time? These statements can be comforting, but they can also serve as blinders, keeping us from understanding why we made certain choices or missed certain opportunities. A striking example is in relationships. Often, people stay in situations that aren't fulfilling, telling themselves it's not that bad, or they'll change. This self-deception keeps them safe from facing the truth that change might require difficult conversations or sometimes an ending. By lying to ourselves about what we truly feel or need, we delay hard truths that could ultimately lead us to more fulfilling Another concept that plays into self-deception is cognitive dissonance, a term that describes the mental discomfort we feel when our actions and beliefs don't align. When we act in ways that contradict our values or self-image, our mind scrambles to reconcile these differences. Instead of acknowledging our mistakes or changing our behavior, we might instead justify or rationalize our actions to reduce this tension. It's a tug of war in the mind, a struggle between who we want to be and who we actually are. Think about someone who values honesty but finds themselves telling a lie. Instead of admitting, "I lied, and that goes against my values," they might say, "It was just a small lie. No big deal," or "I had to lie to avoid hurting someone's feelings." By rationalizing the behavior, they reduce the inner conflict without having to change their actions. This can be comforting in the moment, but over time, these small justifications can erode self-trust and authenticity. Self-deception through cognitive dissonance may make life more comfortable in the short term, but it prevents us from learning and growing. We start living in a loop of justifications and avoid confronting the underlying issues. The real work, the work of growth, lies in facing the discomfort, in owning our choices, and making adjustments rather than masking our actions with comforting excuses. Breaking the cycle of self-deception requires courage and compassion. First and foremost, it involves the willingness to ask hard questions, even when the answers might be uncomfortable. Simple questions like, "Am I truly happy in this situation?" or "Is this choice aligned with my values?" can reveal hidden layers of truth. Self-reflection is a powerful tool here. When we pause to look inward, we give ourselves the space to recognize patterns. Journaling can be especially helpful in this process. By writing down our thoughts, fears, and justifications, we begin to see recurring themes. Perhaps we notice a habit of rationalizing certain behaviors or a tendency to avoid certain topics. This awareness is the first step toward change. Embracing vulnerability is another crucial part of this journey. Often, self-deception is a way to avoid feeling vulnerable. Admitting that we're afraid, uncertain, or struggling can feel daunting, but it's also where growth begins. By allowing ourselves to feel these emotions, to sit with discomfort without rushing to fix or hide it, we create space for honesty. We can ask ourselves, what am I truly afraid of? And approach the answer with compassion. Self-compassion is essential because it allows us to confront difficult truths without harsh self-judgment. Recognizing that self-deception is a human tendency, something we all do, can ease feelings of guilt or shame. By approaching ourselves with understanding, we make it easier to be honest about our behaviors and motivations. We can view self-deception not as a flaw, but as a strategy our mind has used to protect us, a strategy we now have the opportunity to grow beyond. In the words of Carl Rogers, a pioneer in psychology, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. Self-compassion doesn't mean accepting our deceptions and stopping there. It means recognizing our humanity, understanding our fears, and gently working through them. By building a foundation of kindness toward ourselves, we create the safety needed to face uncomfortable truths and start making authentic choices. One of the most empowering steps in overcoming self-deception is learning to sit with uncomfortable truths. Instead of shying away from thoughts or realizations that feel difficult, we can begin to embrace them as part of the human experience. The truth may not always be comfortable, but it's grounding. It allows us to make choices from a place of clarity and authenticity. In relationships, for example, this might mean acknowledging when our needs aren't being met, instead of convincing ourselves that everything is fine. In our careers, it could mean recognizing when we're not feeling fulfilled, rather than staying in a role that doesn't align with our values. Facing these truths may lead to difficult decisions, but it also opens up the possibility for genuine fulfillment and connection. Living authentically means embracing all parts of ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, our dreams, and even our fears. It's about choosing self-awareness over comfort and making choices that align with who we truly are, rather than who we think we're supposed to be. Authenticity doesn't mean perfection. It means honesty, resilience, and a commitment to living in alignment with our values. As we let go of self-deception, we begin to see ourselves more clearly. This clarity gives us the power to build lives that feel true to who we are. And while the journey may not always be easy, it's deeply rewarding. Each step we take toward honesty brings us closer to a life of purpose, connection, and inner peace. Thank you for joining me on this journey of self-discovery. Remember, self-awareness is a lifelong practice, and every step, no matter how small, brings us closer to the life we truly want to live. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a gentle reminder that growth begins with truth. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep growing, and keep choosing the path of authenticity.